We are going to call the meeting to order. It is 2:31 p.m. on this 13th of September 2018. And I always have to remind myself to take the roll call. So otherwise I would forget. Mr. Young. Mr. Van Hooven.
Here.
I am here. Ms. Petco. Here. Ms. Acton. Here. We do have four. There are 6 of us here. I believe 11. I believe Ms. Walsh, we know should be here a little bit late, but we'll note it for the meeting minutes when she arrives. All right, would you make the public involvement announcement, please?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. If you have a business item or a presentation by staff or consultant, the committee will then be given a chance to discuss the matter, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. First item before us is approval of the agenda.
So we will approve. Second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Lindu, seconded by Mr. Van Hooven. Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Let the record show that Mr. Hanson has joined us.
Fashionably late.
Oh, and Mr. Levine. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we are now on to item 4, the approval of the meeting minutes. We have 2 sets in front of us, the 19th of July and the 9th of August. So we'll start with the 19th of July.
Move to approve.
So moved by Mr. Linder, seconded by Ms. Acton. Are there any objections? Feels like forever and a day ago. Okay, hearing none objections. The July minutes are approved. Let the record show that Ms. McNulty has also joined us. Okay. We're on approving meeting minutes. We are looking at August. With the documents now. So yes, we're now looking at the August 9th meeting minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Van Hooven, seconded by Mr. Linder. Are there any objections to approving those minutes? All right, and those meeting minutes are approved. Moving right along, we are on to our first action item, 5A, which is the 2019-2022 Transportation Improvement Program Public Hearing Draft Release.
Okay, let's begin fun. So just as a bit of a refresher, we have the 2 main documents that we need to do with the Federal Transportation Plan regulations. We have a 20-year plan, which is our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, it's the MTP, and that includes all surface transportation projects that might occur in the municipality of Anchorage or inside the AMATS boundaries for the next 20 years, regardless of source of funding. Could be federal funds, state funds, municipal bonds, private funds, any source of funding. And then we'll put all those projects in there. And then we need to create a 4-year program, which is what are we going to do with federal funds in the next 4 years. So this project is the Transportation Improvement Program, and that's the 4-year program we're going to do for the next 4 years using federal surface transportation funds. So we have road projects, we have non-motorized projects, we have a lot of transit things in there, we have the railroads projects in there that are federally funded through FTA. And the process that we go through, again, is we have to update it every 4 years. And so we start with the criteria that we use to place projects in there. And let's see, it was September of last year, we had a comment period for the criteria that we used. It went up for 30 days. We took those comments and created some new criteria. We then did a call for nominations for projects, and that occurred in January of this year for another 30 days to look at possible projects for inclusion. Once we took all those nominations in, we then have to do the process of scoring and ranking those projects. In addition, along with the nominated projects, we look at the projects that are in the short range of that 20-year plan, the MTP. So any project that's in the short range portion of the MTP, which is the first 10 years of that plan, unless it's already been built, we rank and score it for the conclusion of the TIP. And then depending on how it scores in the criteria, it may get funded, it may not get funded. So we did all that. We had the comment period July 19th through August 20th. We have about 94 comments. The large page there was just some coloring on the front page. Or for the committee members, it's on your page there. That is the comment response summary. So staff went through and worked to come up with responses to the comments that we received. A lot of the comments, as you probably heard, were related to the one project. And so those answers are in there. It's very similar. It's the same answer for all 80 some odd requests on those. In addition, the committee should have, and then there's a small stack over there of this. These were comments that were received that were, they may have graphs in them, they may have pictures in them that just don't translate well into an Excel spreadsheet. So I guess it's possible that someone who is more technologically astute than me could figure out how to put them in an Excel spreadsheet, but I could not. So they just got scanned in, the committee has them, and then there's a stack over there with those. So those are, in some cases, I was able to pull some of the comments over. In some cases, it's just the graphics, et cetera, just couldn't pull them over to a spreadsheet. So they're there, but they're all encapsulated there. On the front of them are some comments from the Rapid Creek Community Council that I just received. So they came in after the public comment period. But their community council did not meet during the public comment period or over the summer. So we're going to accept those comments. They're still in the process of creating this tip, so their comments are here. We have not really had a chance to look at those. Staff hasn't to adjudicate those. And then at the back page, the very back of that stack is a letter from the University of Alaska, their statewide land management office, also talking about the north access to UMac district. So it's one other letter on that topic. I think in terms of information related to that, that's kind of what I was going to share. What we're looking to do is ask for your recommendation to the policy committee to release this for as a public hearing draft. Our operating agreement requires that we take the tip through the Anchorage Assembly for their review and recommendation. And their schedule is such that it takes a while to get on their agenda. And so we have moved the policy committee date from the 27th of this month to the 20th in order to get on the Assembly's calendar for introduction in the first meeting in October and public hearing in their second meeting in October. We will still be a little bit behind our schedule because the federal fiscal year starts October 1st of this year, so we're not going to make that date. But the sooner we can get this thing adopted, the better. So that's why we moved the policy committee meetings just up a week so we can get things entered in to get on the October agenda. Otherwise, we'd be in the November timeframe and not get the tip adopted till December, and we'd just be 11 months behind of getting projects moving. If we have that little lapse there, if we have that stoppage in when this tip, the current tip ends at the end of September and the new one's supposed to start October 1st, the only thing you can't do is start new projects or new project phases. It just, in other words, going from a right-of-way phase to a construction phase or a design phase to a right-of-way phase. It just so happens that the previous tip has a lot of projects that are getting finished. We've got a lot of work done in the last 4 years. And so a lot of the projects that are suggested in here are new projects that are going to be starting new. And so the sooner we can get moving and start obligating the money so we can start design or start the studies that we have suggesting there, the better. That's why we moved it up to just a week. Did I miss anything? anything, Aaron? I think
Nope.
that kind of covers it all. Okay.
Good.
So, there are a few, again, most of the comments that are in here related to the Northern Access Project, but there are a number of other ones that are not, that I highlighted in yellow here to kind of give the committee sense, because there are things that are, just to borrow the vernacular, above my pay grade, and it's up to the TAC to recommend to the policy committee what they want to do. They're just things that I can't make a decision on, Aaron, I can't make this decision, and it's above the staff level. So however you want to go through this, we can, the committee's going to be given a chance to discuss it, and then the public is obviously here wanting to have a comment period as well, so we can do that. And then adjudicate the comments, or comments first, everyone good. I thought we would take public comment and go through the comments, but it's your call.
Take public comment first.
Take your public comment before you start voting on this, but
You want us to discuss the one in yellow first, or no?
that's probably a good idea, actually, yeah. I'm just gonna guess that those aren't ones that they're gonna be commenting on, but I'm not sure.
I guess that's true. It's a question for the committee. Do we want to discuss the ones that staff needs input on first, or do we want to take public comment, see if that impacts any discussion we may have on any of those first, I guess, process?
Or vice versa, I think we should do the one that staff needs help with, because it might. Public as well, they're all on the other side of that. Sorry.
Does anybody have, I guess, a preference? I mean, generally, I mean, when we had the comments, I did try to look through all of them before I got here. I didn't realize there was another document, you know, of those, but I guess my preference would be to go through at least the ones that staff need further information on, and we can open it to public comment, and then we can go, I mean, we always open it to public comment and then go through and actually make our decisions and recommendations to the policy committee. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, all right, so first comment, it looks like on that first page, is a comment from Jerry, actually.
Yes. Yeah, the draft tip shows providing $1 million in 2022 for design of Academy Vanguard. Currently, Muni has a project for that section. The state is constructing 97th Avenue, 92nd Avenue, a portion of the way over to Academy to Abbott. CRS is kicking in. And we were to construct from where they stopped over to the Abbott, and it requires quite a bit of right-of-way acquisition. The plan originally was for these bond funds. The Assembly last year removed those bond funds from the CIP and CIP. I think that I'm going to defer to Mr. Weldon. I think he had quite a few meetings out there, and my understanding, this is the #1 project from that community council for improvements. Is that's what they're proposing?
You're opening the door, Jerry.
Anyway, I'll just continue on this. Well, $1 million in 22 is not going to help us. The state is planning on constructing about that time. If we do not have this ready about the same time, and I could turn this whole project into it's really going to be a mess there. Traffic up and really impact the residents over in that neighborhood. So to actually do it correctly, since we've already had the design, but we have to take a step back if we're going to use the federal funds, do an environmental document, a request to put in $500,000 in there to do that, and we can continue the design after that. have right-of-way acquisition. And right now, the estimate for those properties there is about $5 million. And then putting in the construction funding for 2022.
Let the record show that Ms. Walsh trained us at 246. I guess my question is, what is staff looking for?
Well, it's a significant, it would be a significant change from what was happening there. It would have to,
Take the money away from other
So,
projects.
exactly, so. Obviously, they're competing projects, or not competing, but parallel projects in a similar area that, you know, we just have to figure out what to do if we're gonna move those money around.
Well, so a couple issues that are a challenge for us. The Seward Highway project is based on an approved environmental assessment that goes back years. To try to incorporate or federalize additional aspects of this, whether it's a
I
Vanguard
was kidding.
It's just, yeah, so which part are you kidding about? 'Cause I'm kidding about all of it.
No, I'm not.
Because,
Probably just for the construction.
yeah, I'm not even sure, commingling, there becomes a connected action piece to it. And so when DOT would combine a federal, non-federal, and different types of public involvements in environmental clearances, it becomes problematic for us to.
As you may recall, the previous agreement for the federal current project, we design and you guys do the construction.
Execute.
So I think that's probably what would happen.
Well,
Yeah, that's a problem, because as mentioned, you know, if we're gonna do the construction on this, we can't do the construction with the existing project, because it's not part of that project. So we would have to start all over to do environmental documents.
And I understand that there has to be that section right there of the road was not included in the environmental document. That's why I was saying that in 2019, there needs to be some money set aside for an environmental document. We just have the funding for the design right now.
So I
It's still
guess that's a clarification question, that if an environmental document was done separately for this scope of work, is directly adjacent to it, could it not be constructed as the other one, has its own environmental document?
so I think you could run into just scheduling issues.
Oh.
So typically 2 years, 3 years for environmental document. We're not allowed to start line right away. Environmental documents are approved. So if you start kind of linearly projecting out the timelines on this, federal language, you won't really marry up with what the department currently has programmed it for execution. So you're going to hope with this whole thing is to marry up the two things.
I don't know if it's married up, but if not, then to get it constructed as soon as reasonably possible after you do this, so we don't have this traffic mess and impacts to the residents.
Sure. And that,
So,
as it's structured right now, this line of logic is going to allow us to meet that end. But I think there's probably other things we can talk about.
so just, I'm trying to make sure that I have a good idea. So say an environmental document was begun in 2019, you're saying it's very likely that that environmental document would not be completed until probably 2021. So that's when right-of-way begin, or the 2021, and then you're probably looking at a year or two of right-of-way and then construction.
Typically 2 years to 3 years for right-of-way acquisition and relocation efforts. So we have to follow the Uniform Relocation Act. It's fairly strict.
And we do too.
Yeah.
We follow it.
Okay. So you're really looking at 2024, 25 if we federalize this thing to see final. construction.
I guess my biggest point was $1 million in 2022 for design.
That makes it even less likely.
It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing, it wouldn't help anybody.
So what do you need? What do you need to continue the project?
Either do bond funds, or we need to get funds for an environmental document, federal funds on it.
So I know the bond funding for the right-of-way acquisition. There's plans to put that back in.
There is a draft.
A draft one, okay.
and- which needs to be approved by the mayor, which needs to then go to the assembly.
Okay.
And then that needs to go to the voters. If anywhere along the line,
Sure.
it can change.
So I have a question for staff related to the projects within this table too. Are they in order of guess of how they fell in the ranking? Or are they just,
None of these are they're not in priority order. It was just kind of how they were put in.
okay, so it's not, really looking at the fact that it's down at number 4, it's not technically ranked 4th, it just fell into the top. Okay. Are there any other questions from the committee regarding Jerry's comments, any other clarifications? I guess it's a discussion for, well, we can't make a decision yet, because we're not, I guess, voting yet, but it's for the committee to kind of decide whether or not funding needs it, we're recommending. Right now, there already is $1 million, as Jerry said, in 2022, whether or not the money can be used elsewhere, and considering that if that money gets shifted by a year, or if we propose any additions, that money has to come from another project, correct? Yeah, so. Is it just the total, or is it 5 years?
We're constrained by a year to 20.
Well, it's a little over 30 million total, but this table's generally 19 to 22, 23.
Got it. So basically, like, if we move that $1 million from 2022 to 2019, then we're gonna have to take $1 million away from something else in 2019.
Whether that's this table or any of the other tables.
Yep. I thought so, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the ramifications of what we're discussing. Okay. Well, I guess we've discussed that one. Should we take recommendations? I mean, did we decide the process?
I think we probably get your thoughts on this, and then we'll have the public comment, and then we can come back and do that.
Oh, this thing.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts? Jerry, do you still want to, are you still recommending the numbers that you're recommending?
I mean,
Sorry.
the $1 million in 22 is not going to help the situation. It puts that project out till 27, 28. They'll finish their project, and actually residents will suffer with the traffic impacts and such. So, you know, if we just put 500,000 in for environmental document, Wolfgang, you think that's for 2019?
If it was just a standalone document, that might cover the bulk, but if we are, this results in a connected action with the highway, then we're looking at the broader document that covers the whole highway, and now it doesn't cover the requirement. And it will extend the department's timeline for delivering the Seward Highway project. So we've got this thing already programmed. I think really, the city and the state have been in lockstep for quite a few years about developing these in parallel so that we can minimize the impacts to that neighborhood and try and combine these things in terms of you executing yours and the state executing ours. I would recommend that the city continues along that course, that they get the right-of-way funding, that they purchase the right-of-way hopefully the stars line up and the mayor approves and the assembly approves and the voters approve. Purchase the right away, and that will keep you on track.
Yeah. I mean, that, to me,
That's the
would be
ideal
better.
situation.
So you're saying, Wolfgang, that your recommendation is not to include this in the text?
I just don't think that it's realistic to expect $500K and a reevaluation of the entire project. The state would be willing to install the project for another 2 to 3 years in delivery to be able to have this minor aspect that we've been under the understanding that cities will be working to execute in conjunction or with the same timing that we are. So the recommendation is to stay the course, to obtain the right-of-way funds through the mayor and the assembly and the voters, and to deliver the Academy Vanguard project within the same timelines as the Department of Transportation, Seward Highway project, and 92nd Avenue. That's the best scenario, and least impactful on the neighborhood. So.
Any other questions or clarifications from the committee?
I get, and I don't really have a problem with that. If that's the case, I don't see the reason for $1 million in 22. Yeah, it says design. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know where you need your right
So
away.
you wouldn't need it. So you're saying you wouldn't need that $1 million cost to proceed with installing?
Not for design and not in that year.
This is, I guess, a question that I have as far as our role as the technical committee. Because part of this, I mean, as far as determining whether or not a project should or should not be in the TIP, the project was ranked or shown, I guess, as a need and was, nominated and shown as a need. But as far as determining the funding base and whether or not we want to fund it this way, is that a question for the TAC or is that a question for the policy committee?
Well, so we rank score projects, and then we figure out, there's a bunch that are state, here's some that are city facilities, and then Aaron would get hold of those different folks and say, hey, so if we wanted to add this up, where would you start, what's your timeline, what's your schedule, and that sort of thing. And so that's how we got that information, talking to the project managers for those projects. This is not one, well, there is certainly some controversy, it was not horribly fraught with controversy. It's something that you folks, the TAC, would recommend it based on the technical aspects of it, and whether something can be done in this kind of time frame that's, that's your area of expertise, not mine, so. I guess I would ask for your recommendation on whether this one does make sense in there, adding all that kind of information in.
Would we then recommend that, and approve that we stay the course as the project was previously scoped and remove that $1 million from the?
Yeah, my thought is
you're
you're gonna do one of two things. You're gonna say, all right, we're federalizing it and we're gonna need 500,000 for design in such and such a year, and then we'll just start plugging it in as it is. Or we're gonna say, it doesn't make sense to federalize it, take everything out. And either one is completely fine with me.
So, but from a TAC recommendation, we would say, it's our recommendation, based on what we just discussed, it's best to not federalize this, and then turn it over to
Yeah,
policy.
and recommend it to the policy committee. They get to make the final decision on all of this stuff anyway.
Okay. And just, I guess, one final clarification, so the Seward Highway, that's part of the Diamond to O'Malley section, correct? And that one is that one also in the TIP? Or is that one?
We're almost ready to.
That's in NHS, so that's
Oh, that's in
project
the-
through NHS. That's
Got it.
the system, yeah.
Which table is that?
It is now table, I think it was 10. Mass transit, sorry.
9. Okay.
I should have kind of mentioned that at the very start. We kind of moved tables around in the tip to hopefully make it make more sense. In other words, we used to have some state-run programs, and then the AMATS allocation, and back to state, and then over to transit, and then transit railroad. So this was kind of, let's start with just the ones that are the AMATS allocation, and everything after that is, it was included here, but it's not part of our allocation.
So that's showing Seward Highway, O'Malley Road, Diamond reconstruction, that's showing design and right-of-way phase in 2019. So that doesn't actually show construction either. Is that correct?
Typically 18 months or 3 years. There's a lot of right-of-way on that. So if you're showing a right-of-way hit in 19, you can expect 2021, 2022 for construction. The STIP is only a 4-year document, of course, so the 18 to 21 STIP is, so it's just going to show 21 and beyond for phase 4 for construction.
Actually, I guess I have a question about that, because this is showing, I mean, the tip that we're looking at is from 2019 to 2022, but this table shows 18, 19, 20, and 21.
We talked about this at the meeting, so you lined up this table, just comparison, just doesn't go beyond.
Got it. Okay. And that's why it has the estimated funding
Yes.
after 2021. Okay. That's shown after 2021. Do we have any other questions or comments on the committee on this one? No? All right. So we will make a final recommendation decision on that after we open public comment. All right, the next one we have before us is a comment actually from Brian. Mr. Lindenmood, about your Ocean Dock grant.
I guess, what about that one, DOT and, I think it was just DOT, I can't remember what the name of it was, that's been looking at trying to figure out how to unload the mess at the north end of C Street / Ocean Dock connection outside the gate before the last one. The scope and sort of the lines are on the map that they had to work with and develop a relatively constrained, and they came up with some ideas. And there's sort of 3 levels of ideas, and I'm not entirely sure any longer, because I don't have it in front of me, whether there was a final recommendation or whether the recommendation was you could do this if you have this much money, this if you have this much money, this if you have this much money. And my sense is by the time you get to the second and the third one, they're getting relatively expensive, at least from what we've seen. And none of it actually solves the congestion problem. The basic problem is that you've got a track that we're on a lot, and you have everything going in and out of that port more or less at the same time. And for us, it's not a matter of like down here somewhere where the train just goes through and keeps going. We pull forward, we stop, and then we pull farther forward, we stop some more, then we back up, and we stop, and we fiddle part around there for a long period of time.
Usually when I'm late for a meeting.
Yeah. And we would not, and we generally find out what her schedule is and schedule our trains accordingly.
Yes, I do.
So to solve that, actually, if you look at it from 30,000 feet, appears to be simple. It's not, but it appears to be simple because right now the track goes across the road, goes to the gate, and then goes across the road back the other way. You simply take the road and put the road where the track is, and take the track and put the track where the road is. Not everything goes away. We still block C Street. There's still a road into Stevedores, I believe.
I don't care about them.
Yeah. So, but it would at least keep that main thoroughfare open regardless of what it is that we're screwing around with. And our concern is that funding cycles being what they are, is if you spend a bunch of money on this, you haven't solved the overall thing. Moreover, we believe that between the port and the road and the DOT and potentially the community, you know, if we could get an airtight concept put together, this is sort of low-hanging fruit for federal grant programs. Particularly if all 4 of us go and say, we need this And so our concern of having this as a tip right now is we don't want, is twofold. Number one, we don't think it really solves the problem. And number two, we feel that there's probably other options to spend it other than just out of our money. Hopefully we can leverage some of our money. But that's going to take some development outside what's.
It really is an elegant idea. Just slide the road up against the base of the hill and have the track on the outside, then truck traffic's doing this and this and this, and trains doing that and that. Yeah, they're blocking a couple things, but they're no longer blocking the gate,
Yeah.
ever. It's awesome. You should get a raise.
So it sounds like the board supports this.
Yes, absolutely.
Sharon.
No, we talked to our, Brian came over and we talked it through, we're like, wow, brilliant, you must be a redhead.
And, well, there's a lot of stuff in that corridor, the utilities, track, lots of tracks. Their gate that they're working on right now, and we did talk about how much of their gate project is something that could be relocated. We've got customers in the mix. It is, you know, from a cost per mile standpoint, it's gonna look like you're building a bridge, not building a road, but it's fairly contained, and we think would actually go a lot farther towards a longer-term solution there.
The gate is actually movable. Everything is set up.
If we hit it with a train, everything
Well,
is moving.
it's actually set up, if you look at it closely, so you can pick it up and move it, because if we have extra wide loads, we can actually.
You have to.
You have to be able to, yeah.
Anyway, so that's the source of the comment. We recognize that we don't necessarily have an entity drawing that we can put in front of you. We recognize there's been a lot of work done already. And, you know, there's certainly aspects of the work that's been done already that would be probably incorporated. It was I think it was a box on a map problem from the beginning. And, you know, we and everybody, I think, did a great job within that box, but it just needed to be zoomed out.
So what's your recommendation then to eliminate this project as it is?
Well, that's where I do not know enough about how things live on the FHWA side of things enough. Is this something that we could simply look at and potentially rescope a little bit and do some additional analysis on? Or is this something we put on the shelf and start over again? Or, you know, I'm not sure how studies live within the FHWA.
Is this something that AMATS is currently working on?
Well, it kind of plays into the presentation we're going to have later, I think, to some degree, but.
Sure.
You know, this is a specific road project to actually work on something down there. The study is the study, but we can't put it in here with zeros across the board. It could be added later. You could add this project in. It would be a major amendment to the tip. That would take a long time, but you could add it later, or it could sit there for 4 years.
I guess from my perspective, the way we do it over at Ship Creek anyway, is if we get it far enough along, where we've got a decent concept, and we've got buy-in, and we've got people willing to commit to a map, writing grants for something like this, I think would go a long way, and I don't think it will sit for 4 years. I think if we could get the planning work done in a year or so, we could probably get a grant application. I know we would support it. Now, whether the city does it, or whether the DOT does it, or whether the port does it, we're gonna have to look at where the granting agency is, and some things DOT actually has to do on our behalf, but,
And right now, it's $1 million for, here's the design, well, no, I guess it's 500,000 in 2019 design, and $1 million in 2021 for right-of-way, based on the recon study. So I guess related to that, my question is, that recon study, did that already, is the environmental document for this already been completed?
No.
No?
It was just a recon study, there was no environmental document done.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Yes, that's part of, for the Ocean Dock Road intersection improvements right here, part of that design is the environmental document.
Okay. I do have a question related to this. It's been a little while since I've read the report, regarding this. Is, I guess, a matter of timing. This is showing design right of way. It's not actually showing construction within the scope, within, this plan. Part of it was related to the traffic congestion.
Mhm.
And, I mean, another big part of it that came up through the public process was related to a lot of the non-motorized traffic that's occurring in this area. So it's not, in my mind, it's not a complete loss. I mean, it's recognized some of the issues out here are related to, you know, there are some visibility issues, there are some pavement conditions related to drainage. The question comes down to whether or not it's worth investing all the money for this project, if there's a bigger project that would actually help solve both the congestion and then be able to to solve some of those little solutions. But then I'm sitting here going, you know, what's the timeline of that? Because to me, that just keeps pushing further and further out some of those non-motorized improvements that really would be valuable, no matter what option gets moved forward. So, I guess that's something I'll definitely.
You run into the same problem we have when we put something in and part of the whole federalization of it is suspected of a certain period of life, and if you take it out before it reaches that life, you've got to go back and say you're sorry, and come back and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
That's the other risk.
Which is,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you invest this money.
And then we tear it
it's-
out 5 years later.
Exactly. Yeah, we have the same thing. Okay. Any other questions or clarifications on this one?
You know, I dug into it a little bit. I believe Brian is right. There was a limited and boxed kind of approach to a very small area within a very complex area, given the port and the railroad operations. But in saying that, it was done with a purpose. The purpose was to eliminate in a short term, for a very low dollar amount, something that we could make corrections to within a matter of 2 or 3 years, not several. So. Brian's right, there are, widen that aperture and make some larger holistic changes, but the cost would be dramatically more, and it would take a lot longer to do that as well. So we only have 20-some million a year in allocation for AMATS. That's not a lot of money. This is a couple million. You start broadening out that aperture to include larger, more holistic solutions for that Ship Creek area, you're going to get up into the tens of millions very quickly, which is going to be the preponderance of your yearly allocation. So it's kind of, where do you want to put your money? The department saw this as a very low-cost solution to make some very, very near-term improvements for congestion and pedestrian and non-motorized use down there. So it's just different ways of looking at it. Brian's not incorrect, neither is as well. But we saw it as a low-cost thing. We very well could do a longer-term approach and a wider approach that would end up overlaying some of these improvements. But I think the short-term gains and the safety gains might warrant that risk. So attainable, feasible, you know, these are the things we think about.
I'm on the same, we have the same conversation when looking at Whitney Road and North C Street and really the need to relocate a track. And we've been hesitant to really recommend that because we recognize it's going to almost immediately bump that to tens of millions plus, you know. I mean, so I recognize realigning a railroad track is not something that's going to happen very quickly, and I'm with you in the sense that it became very clear in those meetings that really the bike and ped activity is already happening down there. It's a Ship Creek area. There's a lot of interest. And not having a place for them to be is scary, to be honest. And I want them to have a place to be. And I almost feel that moving this project forward in the short term, while I may not find a full solution, I know that looking at the traffic numbers, delays, changes, everything like that, you're kind of like, yeah, there's not really much change. I almost don't even see it. It's not named a congestion mitigation. It's really not. It does end up being intersection improvements, which is kind of what this is showing us. It is an intersection improvement, so the question comes down to whether we have a larger project that maybe does overlap, that is really looking at the port congestion between the railroad and the port. I still think some of these improvements are going to be valuable valuable and wouldn't be torn out, because they'll kind of control it out of that, so,
So the thing.
yeah.
Well, I should say, there's another consideration. I'm totally behind what Brian's talking about happening, and we'll pursue that regardless.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I don't know how many, who may or may not, maybe Michelle's heard of it, but Ship Creek Boat Launch, that open area right there, they're, you know, looking at changing that into a campground of America type, which of course will bring a whole bunch more.
Does it make sense then to leave this project in as is and maybe add a second project? I don't know whether this is the right venue for that, but certainly if we're going to, if it's nothing but Sharon and I that are trying to figure out how to get some grant funds into this, it's going to be part of the thing. If we all recognize that it's a mess, it probably should be in there, even if it's a lesser.
Especially for the freight movement outside of the world.
I guess we can nominate it. The question comes down to whether or not it fits within this tip. I mean, it might be something that's MTP, and really nominated and considered to be MTP, and it might end up being illustrative because the cost.
You know, I recognize that
Yeah.
we're, you know, pushing 8 figures at that point.
Yeah.
But, you know, just me looking at it, it feels like it's about $10 million. We make it $20 million, we try hard. So,
Get the price of your railroad.
but, I mean, the reality is, you know, do you take $3 or $4 million worth of AMATS money and leverage that against Fed through a fast lane type of grant? Recognizing that we still have the issue of at being fiscally constrained, so it's gonna be a real stinker in that, if you can find some way to get an off-ramp for it, but.
Well, maybe it sits in table 11, if you're gonna go after some competitive funds for it, and it comes out of the table that it's currently in, and it's moved over to that. And so then it's in the tip already, and when you go to apply for the funds, it's already there and it's waiting for you.
Yeah, because that's one of the issues that we have when we are doing these grants get announced, we got, you know, pick a number, 30, 60, 90 days to do it, and it's just like calling everybody you know to slam it in the tip right away, so that.
So that's one of the things that we did with a couple projects too, is we knew that we were gonna go after some of the competitive funds.
Okay.
Sure. Aaron's got some.
Yes.
Aaron Yoganalen with DOT NPF. A couple things on this. AMATS in the state are looking at critical freight corridors. It's part of the FAST Act that allows NHFP funding, National Highway Freight Planning funding, or program funding to be spent on critical routes. And so what I might recommend is maybe wait until that process is done, because then that makes, if this road gets added to it, for example, you can work on adding it. It would make additional funding available. In the meantime, a recommendation is maybe add a study in to determine what actually needs to be done in that area. So when then it comes time to getting funding, you're a lot more prepared, and you can actually send something that says, this is what we want to do, we've already studied it, we're ready to move forward. And that's an easy study to add into the tip now, if you want, and then kind of go from there.
Thank you. Any other, I guess, questions or comments? Do you have any, I guess, modifications to your recommendation now that we've discussed it a bit more? Mr. Lindner?
I'm all for doing as Aaron said, or even whether we both what Aaron and Katie said, if we want to put it table 11 as its own standalone thing, leave this alone. But then put it in the study area, in the study, and, you know, it feels, it doesn't feel like actually $1 compared to like 50,000 to me.
You can ask a consultant, or you would be eligible for it. You probably want to put in about maybe 200, 250 just to get a robust enough study, because you got to factor in overhead taken off, everything like that. So.
Well, right, in project management and all that other stuff, I get that, but it feels like a lot of the information that we have from this existing study, we just have to sort of, we can use that and broaden it and go from there.
Yeah, I'm not really too sure of a cost, any recommendation on that. I'd say 200, 250 just to cover your bases.
Okay.
The question is, I guess, this is specifically called the open dock ramp and intersection improvements. Are we gonna call that Port of Alaska and access? I mean, or do we wanna tie it to the port, railroad? I mean, I guess you'd have to think about the title of what you want to call the project.
Well, from a grant standpoint, I think it's actually, if we say port, intermodal, and access.
Right.
And congestion.
Throw that intermodal in there.
Yeah, Port of Alaska, congestion, intermodal access, all the buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Safe, safe.
And
Safety.
safety, yeah, we'll put safety on that.
Yeah, all of the buzzwords, all right, just something.
So I guess, what do you need from us to make that actually happen? Do you need a letter, do you need a motion, do you need a sticky pad?
Well, we want to propose adding something, I mean, we can make a motion.
You can recommend to the policy committee that they add
Yeah.
something. So when we're
When we
done
get
with.
to that more.
Yeah, when we get to that, we can look at
Public
it.
comment.
All right.
All right, and the next one is also one of your comments you want to do regarding the 92nd Avenue extension.
Yeah, concern there is, and Wolfgang and I sort of had a discussion about this, it looks really great from Google Earth that connect those two, until you actually go stand on the ground and look at what we got going on and you're trying to get through. I can tell you the only way you're going to get through there is to go over the top of this, which will put you mid-drift gas transmission line. So it's a great separation over what is 3 to 4 tracks, is it expensive enough, you can add that in as well. And you're gonna be high enough, because we're already several, 5, 10 feet above the existing ground, that any local access you have along 92nd Avenue is not going to exist. So, given the totality of some of the other grade crossing and intersection issues we have within the municipality right now, spending that amount of money on something that doesn't exist from our perspective would be better spent in some of, fixing some of the problems currently, vis-a-vis Street, vis-a-vis 104th Avenue, 100, any of them. So that was our comment too. If DOT wants to go forth and spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get over top of this right there, then they can. We're not gonna stop them. Yeah, you're gonna be in $100 million to get over there.
Well, right now, I guess the money that's proposed in here, it's $1 million in 2021, and it's designed, so I'm assuming as part of the design, that would be reconnaissance and evaluation, documenting the evaluation of that grade crossing. While I recognize what you're saying to be true, and it's something I've brought up many times myself, one of the things that I think, from the public perspective, is that you and I, as professionals who look at it, know these things when they're not put on paper, when you don't have the backup to explain why pursuing this project is not a good idea, and kind of discard it sometimes without having that documentation. In my mind, it's something that just keeps coming back up and coming back up and coming back up and coming back up until you actually kind of do put, the nail in the casket, saying that it's gonna cost this much money to do this, and what are we really going to get out of it? So maybe the money to do the evaluation so that you can fully document all of the issues, and maybe it is. I guess the question is whether or not we think it is a priority or not, but it is one of the near-term projects in the MPP. So, I mean, if it's not a realistic project, it probably makes sense to document that so that it should reasonably be removed from the MPP to talk. I mean, or put it into the illustrative category if it's really not something that wants to move forward. So, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this was, we put a lot of investment into the 76th and to 92nd, and trying to improve the circulation and take some of the pressure off the Diamond Old Sword interchanges area. The municipality extending 100th, these are all actions we're trying, again, to get the circulation doing better, to take some of the pressure off the bigger streets. So Brian's absolutely right. This was a victim of Google Earth. So we wouldn't see that great separation numbers kind of. do agree with you too, Stephanie, that maybe putting a little reconnaissance study, some money to it, to run it to ground, to really run it to ground, whether it's a couple $100 million, $1 billion, 10 million, whatever it is, but also doing an analysis on what is the benefit to the traffic, and what does it solve. I think there's logic in doing it. Just keeping it in as a reconnaissance study and doing that analysis, I think would give it a better.
Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay. Then on to the next highlighted. Do you have any more?
That's it.
Or are those all yours? Okay. Yes, yeah, those are so easy. All right. So, now we are going to open it to public comment, correct?
Yep.
Before we go through anything. So, this is your opportunity to make any There are time limits generally. I mean, there are a lot of people here, and kind of keep things moving along. We do 3 or 5 minutes for comment. I guess I have a little timer on my watch that I can do 2 minutes. Kind of way to let you know that your time's coming up. But just if anybody is unaware, we do ask that if you're coming up to testify, that you state your name for the record, and if it's not a common name, please spell your name for the record so we can get it accurately. And then you will have your 30 minutes to say your piece in your comments on that.
And I think that with the mics around the room, that you probably don't need to come up to testify, but standing up so you're closer to the microphone probably do well enough. Don't need to move around too much.
Yeah, so if you see there are little kind of microphones hanging from the ceiling around the room.
Lights on so we can see people.
The light will be the one in the back there.
Yeah, it's gonna be the one.
See these shiny faces. I know you were back there.
I don't think they're open. The lights aren't always on.
Unless you turn it on there.
Oh, they're good. Now I'm worried about some of the things I've said in the room. I'm in this room a lot.
All recording.
That's true. So, whoever wants to start, this is your opportunity to comment on the 2019 to 2022 budget. Yes.
Good afternoon. Chair Mormillo, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good to see you. Mr. Lyon and committee. My name is Jay Stange. That's S-T-A-N-G-E, just like Strange without the R. And I am the president of the Spenard Community Council. And I have a small list of comments that I'd like to make today. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. It's one of my first meetings with this committee, and I'm glad to be here. So I've been a school teacher in Anchorage for many years, and it's not easy for me to get to these meetings. So I'm glad to be here today. I have my first question is on comment is on process. Mr. Lyon, I wanted to direct this question to you through the chair, if that's okay. I don't see the Spenard Community Council comments on the tips. We have comments that we submitted on August 20th at 9:08 p.m. And those comments were CC'd to Mayor Berkowitz, to Assembly Member Croft, and also to interim Assembly Member Perman and incoming Assembly Member Austin Davidson. So if you didn't have the wrong email address for you, I could have those people forward our comments to you. We generally had addressed the tip on future points, and if I could have an opportunity today, I'd make those comments in person. I know it's late in the process, and I'd like to make sure that my community gets heard. A second process point that I wanted to make is that I've been to a lot of public meetings in my life, and I recommend that you bump the public comments that are on the agenda today up to number 3 or 4. If you genuinely want to be responsive to public comments, I think it'd be good if you heard them before the bulk of the meeting occurred. Just a recommendation. On the tip, we had 3 comments from Spenard Community Council. Number 1, we have not experienced any support in our community for the 36th Avenue couplet that's identified on the TIPS 2019-2022 prioritization list. Nobody in our neighborhood has spoken in support of the 36th Avenue couplet, and nobody has come to present to our council on that particular project either. So we feel like we haven't had an opportunity to either digest or comment on that particular project. We'd love an opportunity to engage with the Technical Advisory Committee before things go to the Policy Committee on that point. Secondly, on the Fish Creek Trail to the Ocean, which is identified in your tips as Northern Lights Boulevard to Tony Knowles Coastal Trail, I have 70 signatures here from community members that are supporting a proposal that was hard negotiated over the summer with some fantastic concessions and communications from the Alaska Railroad. Thank you very much for that. The Josh Durand at Parks and Rec and Taylor Keegan did an excellent job reaching out to the Alaska Railroad to respond to the community's concerns about our need for that. We'd love to see that project bumped up further in the census. We think that we're ready for a design phase as early as this year and construction in 2020. So I'd also like that to be considered. That was one of our comments. And the last one on the tips is Firely Lane. We're generally very supportive in Spenard of road diets, and we are glad to see that project on your list. And once again, we didn't get a chance to comment or to have a presentation done at our council from anybody. We'd love that opportunity because we really support that project. I have one last larger comment that I'd like to make that's in general and not specific to the tips. I want an opportunity to explain to the committee what I've learned in 40 years living in Spenard, which is that Minnesota Boulevard is not a roadway as much as it is a canyon that separates my neighborhood into two pieces. And over the last couple of years, many members of my community have come to DOT and spoken to AMATS representatives in support of additional pedestrian crossings. We have a vulnerable population in that area. It's a very dangerous place. There's quarter-mile intersections with no crossings in between. And we'd really like to enter into a dialogue with this committee and with the policy committee and with AMAT staff about how we can move forward to make Minnesota Boulevard less of a canyon in my neighborhood and more of an amenity. Thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you, Jay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I'm sorry, I'd be happy to re-forward my comments to the committee, the ones that Craig, I think I have your email address, right? I sent it to lioncl@muni.org on August 20th.
Lion-CH.
Pardon?
Lion-CH.
Okay. So I might have sent it to the wrong email address.
If you send them to
Can I send them again?
Make sure they get it right.
Okay, thank you, Craig, I appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you, Jay. Yes? Sure.
My name is Paige Coatney. Last name is Coatney. It's regarding the North Access UMed project. So I'd like to talk about two parts of the environment, environmental justice and the environmental impact of this project. So because of time restraints, I don't need to tell you what the EPA defines environmental justice as, but the EPA does have a goal of all communities and persons to enjoy the same degree of protection under environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. So this road is designed to cut to the most diverse high school in the nation, East Anchorage High, which is therefore the most diverse residential area. The EJ score was 4.5 out of 7.5. That's about a 60% favorable score. But how does this development positively impact the human health or environmental effects for this community? What was the study or the analysis that identified EJ population groups? We don't know. Where is the estimated emission intensity results that will impact these groups? As for the TAZ, or the Transportation Analysis Zone, how is that even calculated? This is not information that we have to know that these scores are true reflections. So I'm guessing that somewhat favorable EJ score is based on access to sidewalks, bike trails, and public transportation. However, the UMed plan, sidewalks and bike trails are listed as amenities, which in case there's money left over, these could be addressed. When was the last time anything came in under budget? In addition, this plan accounts for sidewalks as snow storage. Robbing pedestrians of safe access down this corridor for months out of the year. So therefore, this plan fails to assist and protect one of the most diverse residential areas. Okay, now for the environmental impact, which is not, but should be scored on these projects. This proposed development would be in Class A and B wetlands. These are the highest valued wetlands. Based on the municipality's own watershed management services, the mission statement is to maintain the viability and integrity of our aquatic resources by protecting and preserving healthy watersheds, provide leadership and guidance in watershed management through sound technology and ecological engineering and planning, encourage sustainable growth, maximize safety, minimize flood damage, and conserve natural resources to ensure the best quality for current and future generations. So the UMED plan says, quote, supports rehabilitation of Chester Creek and an important watershed. This sounds wonderful, but how? This plan says no ideas or even a vague concept of how it supports it. Therefore, I can only assume we get lip service of support. I fail to see how the WMS will meet their mission statement or the Chester Creek watershed plan if the UMED goes through, such as preserve healthy watersheds. The UMED fails to protect or preserve the highest valued wetlands. Any development will increase pollutants entering the creek and reduces the existing floodplain. Sound engineering, over 60 feet of peak needs to be stabilized for 1/2 mile of road for $37 million. And that's not even to maintain it. So is that sound engineering? Maximize safety. This plan does nothing to promote the safe transport for pedestrians or cyclists, either along the road, at intersections, or create a safe barrier away from vehicles. In fact, it creates increased contact, greatly increasing the lethality to pedestrians and cyclists. Minimize flood damage. Developing in Class A and B wetlands will create more impervious surface, creating more and increased flooding. And the road will prevent Chester Creek watershed to do what it's exactly supposed to do, which is reduce flooding. On page 22 of the UMED plan, the Corps of Engineers noted back in 1968 that continued development of Chester Creek meant people downstream of APU are not only subject to flooding, but health hazards.
It's been about 4 minutes, so we can wrap
It has
up.
been 4 minutes, 29 seconds, so I'm just gonna, yeah. So, in the UMED plan itself, it states its own construction is bad for the watershed.
Thank you. Are there any questions or clarifications from the committee? Okay. So our vote is Mr. Young. Okay. So, let the record show that Mr. Young and Mr. Ho will be leading us. It is currently 2:39 p.m. Pardon the interruption. Is there anybody else at this time that would like to testify? Please rise and state your name.
Before you start the timer, Craig, please note that comment number 41 is not in the packet of comments. In there it says, please see attached, but I couldn't find it in the packet. Thank you. Okay, my name is Carolyn Ramsey, R-A-M-S-E-Y. I am the president of Airport Heights Community Council. Public opposition to this project has been shown from multiple directions. Of 244 public comments submitted in 2014 on this project, 42% stated that they favored a no-road option, when this wasn't even given as one of the options from the project developers. 10 community councils since then from across Anchorage, throughout the whole bowl, including every council surrounding the project area, has passed a resolution against this project. The 2040 MTP project survey asked the public's opinion for a transportation solution for the UMED district. Of 225 respondents, only 68 or 30% favored a new road. The Page and Turnbull letter that you'll find in your packets from October 28, 2013 to Dow submitted as a public comment stating the overwhelming public opposition to this project. And now, during the public comment for the tip, all 94 comments were submitted by 64 individuals. 49 of those comments submitted were against the UMed Northern Access Road and were submitted by 55 individuals, because multiple people signed some comments, including multiple legislators. So it's beyond me how this can be scored as only a negative 0.6 on the project support. It doesn't make sense. This is not about public safety via access to emergency room. There's another perfectly good hospital a mile to the north that can deal with any and all emergency situations. They do an awesome job over there. If we really want to look at increasing public safety and emergency time response, how about funding a GPS system that will sync with the red rotating beacons on top of light poles? As emergency vehicles get within distance, those beacons start rotating, warning traffic to move out of the way. This could be implemented over a greater distance, providing increased response time for far greater than a half a mile of road ever could, especially a road that only increases traffic congestion along Burgaw. Without H2H and Lake Otis to the Glen interchange completed, project engineers estimated that the traffic along Burgaw Street, north of the UMed district, would increase by nearly 50%, and that wait times at the intersections of Burgaw and Northern Lights, Elmore and Tudor would also increase. Those projects are decades away from completions and close to $1 billion worth, if not more. There are 3 pedestrian-heavy school zones, including Russian Jack Elementary, East High School, and Anchorage Native Charter School. Children from Airport Heights cross these streets every day to get to and from school. We really value our children, their safety, and their lives. There is no right-of-way available along, there is no row available along the stretch of Burgaw. Adding a lane would require eminent domain of everything from single-family homes to multifamily all the way through to light commercial, and cost over $50 million per year in tax-assessed property value that the muni could definitely use, and that was at a 2014 tax rate calculation. AMATS was asked during the public process for the 2015 interim MTP to reduce priority of the UMed Road to long-term or illustrative categories. AMATS deferred considering this change, citing time constraints, and promised to address public concerns later. So we're in later. Can we get this addressed, get it off the tip? The public obviously does not want it, I know. As specified in the UMed District Plan, page 49, number 5, and by the Page and Turnbull letter of October 28, 2013, a UMed TDM should be funded and completed with the results of that study taking precedent before any road is even considered, designed, or thought about, let alone funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And just because I happen to know a little bit about this, my staff were actually going to be pursuing and updating the preemption system to a GPS-based one. That's kind of, now that we've upgraded all of the signal cabinets throughout the municipality of Anchorage to new controller systems, that's kind of the next big project we're going to be working on with the state of Alaska, hopefully to occur over the next 3 to 5 years.
Awesome,
But-
put that money in that.
yeah. But just so you know, that's on our list. Are there any other questions or comments? No? All right. Is there anybody else who'd like the opportunity? Hello. How are you doing?
My name is Paul Stang, S-T-A-N-G. I'm president of the University Area Community Council. And we too would like to talk about the UMed Road. And we've already done a lot of talking about the UMed Road, a lot of voting, a lot of testimony, and most of that is in your comments. Our comments start as comment number 77, which I hope you have read. And if you haven't read it, I hope you will read it. And it also includes in the attached correspondence, it has a resolution from 2015 and testimony also from 2015. And all of those are still relevant and up to date. I don't want to try to go through these comments highlighting high points, because there are too many high points in the time we're allotted. But I hope you really do take the time to read them. I'd like to state unequivocally that the University Area Community Council is adamantly opposed to the UMed Road, the Northern Extension, or any of the other names that it has gone by. The reasons are clearly laid out. Some you've already heard here today. So I'm going to stop there. If there's questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
You know, I've met with both you and Jay on separate occasions, and I just now clicked that you have the same last name. And
Close. Close.
So that's true.
He's got an E on the end.
I know, I'm like, I have those moments sometimes that I've known a husband and a wife before and had the same last name, and I never put two and two together. Until I saw them in an event.
Oh, I don't think we've ever met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, are there any questions or comments for Paul? Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time?
Hi, I'm Diana Evans. I'm from Rogers Park. I'm a chemical engineer by training, but I've been a project engineer for the last 10 years of my career. I just want to reiterate some of the technical traffic and safety issues that have already been brought up today. And I guess most importantly, considering the highway to highway and lake Otis, things that wouldn't be done before this. It's situations like this where new roadways like UMed would only serve to move the traffic congestion to another location without a logical sequencing. It's just technically unsound to build those roads first and have all that traffic diverted through UMed instead of where it should be on the Seward Highway. As far as safety, I came upon a statistic a couple weeks ago. There was a survey by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for Anchorage, and it found that over half the traffic fatalities between 2010 and 2014 were on non-motorized users and motorcyclists. And a lot of our concerns on this project over and over to the project team have been on pedestrian, non-motorized safety, and we just don't get an answer on that. There's no projects in the tip now to address Regatta. There's nothing, down the road that can make this project seem safe to us. And it's putting a lot of traffic, like Carolyn said, along 3 school routes. And is this going to be another situation where the school district is going to require kids to take cars to school just because it's not safe enough to walk? I mean, that's ridiculous. I heartily endorse the TDM approach for the area before an expensive and flawed road project is funded. And maybe you can take some of the UMed money and put it into RDY.
Thank you, Dan. Good to see you.
Yep.
It's been a little while.
You've lost some weight. Good job.
Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Barbara Carl, K-A-R-L, current Vice President of Airport Heights Community Council. Previous to that, I was President. To remind everybody of Yogi Berra, this is deja vu all over again. We fought this fight, and I'm sorry I'm talking about the Regatta extension, UMed Northern Access extension. We fought this successfully a while back, and it's come back to rear its ugly head. The money in the tip would not be enough to do anything that would serve the community at all. I want to remind people that there's, and this has been mentioned in previous comments, there's a perfectly good hospital north of the area, Alaska Regional, and the congestion that this would cause on Regatta would prevent safe access to the regional emergency room by the Regatta and then DeBar area. I echo Mr. Stang's request that you read all the comments, and as Ms. Ramsey has pointed out, so many of them, of the comments on the TIP were on this very project. all opposing. Thank you. And like I say, we've been here before, we don't need to go here again. It reminds you, were it built, even if it were funded by federal funds, which are not enough to do it, it would then remain a project for operation and maintenance by the Muni. And that would have significant negative impact to the community and increase taxes. With that, I'll sit down.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I'm running out of paper space to write down people's names and summarizing comments for myself, so I'm going to grab another agenda. Is there anybody else who would like the opportunity to testify? Going once.
So my name is Ryan Buchholdt, B-U-C-H-H-O-L-D-T, and I'm with the UAA Facilities Department. And it's probably not a surprise why I'm standing up to speak. Our community members probably are guessing. Here to advocate on behalf of the UMed Road, the North Access Road. And I'm not going to belabor some of the points that have been raised in the past that the university has brought forward. As the landowner, we've been very involved with this project over the years. But I will raise at least three specific points, at least from the university's perspective on this, regarding safety, access, and some of our interests as the landowner on this project. Currently, our campus is bisected by the existing north access route into the UMed district. Our east and west campuses really are not a pedestrian-friendly zone. Our campus master plan envisions connecting both those in a way that is more non-motorized connections that would be driving with so much traffic coming down UA Drive. Haven't seen the updated traffic data, but as the operator of the campus, as our institutional neighbors to the south have constructed quite a bit over the last several years, we've seen more traffic coming down UA Drive, which gives us quite a bit of concern given we only have two access points off the east campus. One is on Alumni Drive to UAA Drive, and then at Providence Drive and the other end of UAA Drive, where at that intersection we deal with a lot of opposing vehicular conflicts with folks coming off the Providence campus, as well as a number of non-motorized transportation, our own students crossing, a lot of users in the area. The bus stop in that area certainly causes a lot of pedestrian traffic. We've also seen a spike in the amount of accidents or near misses at the Alumni Drive and UIA Drive intersections. This comes from our University Police Department, as well as a number of complaints from community users as well as students when they're trying to come into and out of that area. Just with the amount of traffic flow, it causes a lot of problems. In addition, the North Access Road would provide another access point off our campus, again alleviating that traffic at our current existing intersections, while at the same time, one of my responsibilities is overseeing emergency preparedness, so it kind of keeps me up at night what would happen if we had to evacuate East Campus with the current road conditions. Now, given we are the landowners and looking at some of our own campus master planning guidelines, we have a strong value on maintaining green spaces and trail connections. I was just having a few conversations with folks recently about how great it is that so many green belts converge essentially on our campus. And in the past, we have put in a great deal of effort as the landowners on how to ensure there are still a lot more of the recreation amenities that are in place for a road to go through. And if this continues to move forward, you can bet that we'll be at the table to help continue to advocate for that. So it meets the needs of not only our campus, but also the community. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ryan. Questions or comments? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Forever hold your peace. All right. Public comments are now closed.
policy committee is just the list of comments?
No. Well, that's a question, I guess,
Because that's the,
So what you're being asked to do is recommend to the policy committee a release of the public hearing draft, so we can take this document through the assembly. All of the comments just need to be adjudicated. So you have comments in there that say, you know, take this project out, add this project in. We have made, the staff has made some recommendations on some of them, and some of them were just kind of, again, as I said, great. So we need your thoughts on that, so we can note that on the comment response summary before we create the final public hearing draft. and go to the assembly.
like some were missing because of the email. Those are gonna get included also.
Yeah, as soon as I can track them down. I just did get Sparrow Community Council's comment, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have those now.
So, as Sharon was just saying, I guess it's our job right now is to go through and review the comments. We had the few that we debated and discussed earlier, and then all the public testimony we just had. But it does sound like there's additional comments that we may not have had the opportunity to review and respond to. I guess, and how are those going to be addressed between now and next week with the policy committee?
Yeah, I just need your, got some ones we discussed earlier that are significant, taking them out. There's a whole, filled. We didn't actually go over these, but your two comments related to a couple of non-home rights projects that we agree with your suggestion that they remove that because of the situation, those are comments 6 and 7. So that's a small hole in the program that we just need to fill in, and Aaron and I just need to look at the other projects that are in the store and kind of squeeze those in there. Show that for the policy committee.
So, this is gonna be tough. Trying to go through and adjudicate all of these comments. Do we wanna deal well, I don't wanna say one by one, but deal with the,
Well, you have 3 highlighted comments that need
to be addressed and
definitely need to
then,
be addressed.
yes,
There's clearly northern access that you would need a suggestion on,
yes.
one or the other. And most of the rest of the comments, there were a lot of, we support this project, that's currently in there.
Yes.
So there's nothing, here's Mr. Butler, Fire Lane, support the project. Well, there's no action that you need to take.
Yeah.
So I would suggest those 3 that are highlighted, and then northern access, a recommendation on that. You could leave it up to the policy committee.
Yeah. Just process, thinking about should we do individual motions or should we discuss our recommendations and do one overall motion for what we're recommending for the tip?
Lori, your thoughts on that? I would think that we could do, it's like 4 comments if you want to count the northern access as one of those 4 that we need to get thought on.
Okay, Mr.
Well,
Wilson?
but do we need to concur where staff is recommending removing something so that we have?
Well, I was thinking, you've got a whole bunch that are, just need to concur with, so.
But we do need
Part of the
to address
motion, but-
those, is my question.
List the ones that you want to go with, and then the 3 individually.
My thought would be, answer the 4 that are outstanding, the 3 that are highlighted in northern access, make a recommendation on that, and then your final motion could be, you've got those, and concur with all the rest of staff comments. Relatively speaking,
Okay, well, I'm,
just a guy doing his
okay,
job.
I'm gonna have us go through page by page though, and kind of look at them and make sure that what you're saying, that we concur with staff, or we at least try to make the recommendations for the ones that the controversial ones that were out here, and then we'll have our final motion that works for everybody. So, page 1. a true ask for an edit or had a true needing to be edited by it is Jerry's comment. And have you modified your recommendation?
You know, it doesn't sound like first of all, the DOT, we probably wouldn't marry up with it very well. And I guess my recommendation is, you know, $1 million in 2022 is not gonna help. I mean, it's gonna be 27, 28, 29 before we even under this process. So I'm almost feeling take it out of the money out of the tip completely, and this project out of the tip.
Okay. Well, you're the one that, I guess, made the comment, so if that's your recommendation.
That would be my recommendation right now.
Okay. Are there any kind of follow-up questions or comments on Jerry's revised recommendation? No? Okay. So the next two comments were mine regarding some of the non-motorized projects and a little bit of the research that I did looking into them as far as money invested. One is Lakeville Drive that is out next to Mirror Lake Elementary. It's a rural local road that has an existing separated multi-use path. It is a shared use roadway, so having a shared use project on this that already functions that way, it doesn't connect anything along the Old Glen Highway and actually goes from municipal right of way to the state right of way. It would dump users into an area where there are no facilities for them. So doing this as a standalone project, to me, I have a hard time with it because it does not connect to anything where there already are bike trails in the area that are connected. So that was what my research was. And then the 10th Avenue pathway, this is actually Muldoon Road. To the east of Muldoon Road, there is a half-width right-of-way that exists. Within that half-width right-of-way is the north fork of the south branch of Chester Creek within that right-of-way. So trying to construct a trail where there is an existing daylighted creek, I think is going to be very difficult to attain, especially with federal funds. So my recommendation was not to move that forward with federal funds. So it looks like Steve sent in comments to update those numbers for the Port of Alaska. And were you able to confirm that those numbers and all that was?
For today.
Okay.
For today, those numbers are what they are.
Okay.
The reason I was late for the meeting, I do have to say this, is because we were at a meeting of purchasing because tariffs were imposed on some piling repairs. We changed the cost of a $300,000 piling to $800,000 piling solely based on tariffs. So keep in mind that any numbers for the port are like,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. President.
Just a comment on process. If we do this way,
Yeah.
we're not going to do that
Yeah.
at all. It's
And I recognize that, but unfortunately, if we don't go through and I guess address the comments, or at least if you haven't read them, I don't know. The question comes down to
I
whether or not we're
understand.
gonna
It's
have to
just
continue the meeting.
yeah, we're not going to get through this today by any.
I agree.
So.
And if we don't, we put it on to the next one. Continue.
And what's the time constraint for
The
Craig?
policy committee has to do it next Thursday. They have to
So
have theirs, so.
so we're losing a quorum.
Yeah. Well, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, it depends on how late everybody can stay.
Yeah.
As long as we have 6 members, we would have 4. So. When we get-
Honestly, the vast majority of these comments are on Northern Access, so.
They are.
So can we do the two? Can we do the two as Craig suggested? The two, I think the two more that were highlighted from Mr. Lindemoot, and then discuss the Northern Access.
Sure. Okay, and that's fine. Well, I guess my question is whether or not, I did go through and read all of these. I didn't know whether the rest of the committee has. That's been the problem in the past. So if you feel comfortable accepting staff's recommendation for most of the other minor comments that were through here, and we only want to address the three that we need to really address the funding and then the controversial discussion, then is that okay with the committee? Okay, all right, so we've already discussed the first one. We're now looking at the Ocean Dock ramp intersection improvements. So do you have, I guess, have your comments changed?
I guess I would propose, I would recommend that we put in a request for to study it for $250,000. Take a look. And,
So leave this project?
just leave it as is, yes. And then we'll hopefully do the study.
So I guess adding the study to, what do we want to call that, portable asset? I guess we
We're gonna
don't
call
have
it
to-
intermodal freight.
Yeah.
Um,
Create a modal congestion reduction.
Yeah. Exactly, that's it. Freight intermodal congestion reduction.
We're in a mobile freight.
Safe freight intermodal.
Do we have a recommended year for putting that money, for recommending putting that, whatever, 200,
Yeah.
what?
Oh, 2019.
Question comes whether or not that can be accommodated.
Well,
With the money that we are removing for, the money that we may be recommending to remove for Academy Vanguard.
22.
Until 2022.
Okay.
So you're looking at, I have to look at the bottom line. If we added 250, if you're adding $250,000 to 2019, it's bringing us up to like 29.5 million, a little bit more than 29.5 million. Is that still kind of within the range?
No, we have to be exact, but we can easily find it.
Okay.
I just need to know the name, the exact name you guys want it to be. I got Port of Alaska Freight Intermodal Congestion Reduction Study. Safety.
I want you to come up with like the best acronym.
and then we'll name it after that. Once you come up with a good acronym.
Okay.
So,
Good.
take all those words, take the first letter, do some Scrabble, and come back.
Okay, so you want freight, intermodal, congestion, safety, study, Port of Alaska, something.
Yeah.
You need to buy a vowel.
We'll see what we can come up with. And we'll try for FY19.
Okay. And the next one was the 92nd Avenue. Are we saying leave that in now?
I understand where you're at, and you're going to have to go through the process to document that that's going to be very difficult. And once you have all the information, it's something that you have a material.
Sorry,
It's a cost for someone to just go out there and stand with their own.
I think you need to put numbers to it though. There needs to be numbers to understand the impact to the transmission line that possibly be used for trying to go over.
How high it is.
We know the terminology of transmission lines, and I've had projects to understand that it's at least $1 million to hold or relocate. That doesn't count elevating or anything else like that, but that, I don't think the general public knows or understands that, so it is definitely documenting for those purposes. So, yes. Aaron.
So the project that's in there right now for the 92nd Avenue extension is actually design funding. So that's the, using federal funds to start, you get the time trap, everything like that. So are you guys wanting to change that to like a reconnaissance study or some kind of study instead?
I think so.
That would be wise.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, just a second. Study, what year are you guys thinking and how much?
2047.
That would be design funding.
With the options of 2022. 2022.
Well, right now, can we leave the funding in the same year that it's currently proposed, to change it to?
Yeah, change it to just a study instead.
Yeah.
Leave it to
It's probably not gonna be $1 million to do it.
It'll help us with that 250 for the ocean, Port of Alaska.
Yeah.
Okay. How
I
much?
will,
What do you think?
What's the, I don't have it in front of me, what's the year on the
The current year for it is $1 million in 2021.
And you probably won't need $1 million, but I'd say if we're putting 250 as a study, put 250 to
Yeah.
have it as a.
Okay. And leave it.
2021.
Leave it, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So those three we taken on. Now we have the controversial one. So, I'm sure, were copies of the comments and responses provided to the public? There was some over there.
I'll accept that.
Okay. Well, just so I guess everybody's on the same page, right now, the staff comment in response to all of the comments that came in regarding the Northern Access project was the Northern Access UMID project is in the short term of the current interim 2035 MTP. All projects in the short term of the current MTP must be ranked and scored for possible inclusion in the draft tip. The existing tip criteria were used to rank and score projects, and that project scored well enough in categories to have it added to the draft tip. Comments on the draft tip will be adjudicated by both the technical advisory and policy committees. Those committees can add and subtract projects as they see fit. So, it is kind of upon us to say what our recommendations are with the policy committee, and then the final decision really does go to the policy committee.
Yeah, I guess what I heard from some of the public comment is that there's an interest in seeing a TDM kind of justification. Would like to hear from you. Is that something that would be warranted item to do? I mean, if you could modify the tip to include.
The question for whether or not the tip can be modified for that, I guess.
If we were to remove this project, could we replace it with another project for the same?
Can you guys speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
You have an audience.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking out loud is part of what I'm doing. So in the current UPW, the Unified Planning Work Program that AMATS has, there is a task in there that talks about a TDM plan. But I don't know that it's going to be a robust enough effort to address this. So if it was that plus something, then.
Yeah, that amount of money is bigger than what we can fit in the work program.
So it would have to complement that effort.
Is it something that if somebody put forward as a nomination, that the tip could be amended later to include?
Well,
Is that easier when you do it?
Once the tip is adopted, a major amendment is a long process. It's 4 to 5 to 6 months, because it has to go through this very similar process to what we had for this, except for not creating new criteria. It's easier to add it while we're doing it now. This is just my vision of this. This is a question that's up to the policy committee, really. I am never someone who is interested in getting a lot more work for myself or my staff. This project is in the short term of the MTP, so we have to rank and score it. And looking at the criteria, it ranked well enough to go. But so technically, it would go in there. Technically, this is the technical advisory committee who is supposed to be looking at just the technical aspects of it. If I were on this committee, which I'm not, this is probably a good thing. I would kick it to the policy committee and have them make the decision. You can make your recommendation, it's good that it's different, but.
So if you were to make the recommendation to take it out, could we, with the recommendation, if we consider putting in a different project, different plan level project?
Sure.
We couldn't hear that.
I had asked just for clarification that if we, so Craig was giving us the advice that we could either recommend to the policy committee that this project either stay in or be taken out. And I was asking him if we recommended that it be taken out from the TIP, that we could with that recommend that a different project instead be substituted for it. And that different project being probably a TDM.
TDM.
Traffic demand model. Thank you.
Management.
That TDM could be done in the design phase, correct?
That's a good question.
I mean, to me, that's all part of the design. I mean,
It can be, yes.
It can
I mean,
be,
the
so
design and
it's,
analysis
I don't
can
know
be.
that there's a separate item or project that needs to be done. That would just be something, and you could put in there, even in the description, a TDM is,
So recommended just a portion of the project for design be moved forward?
no, that's not what I'm saying, it's just that, you know, if you think a TDM needs to be done, then technically, that's part of the design process.
Okay.
So move the project forward.
Yeah.
Keep it in the TIP, do the TDM, and see how the chips fall from that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm, sometimes, I mean, he's a Red Sox fan, I'm not.
But
so-
sometimes he's right.
But right now, I agree with Craig. I mean,
I
I
do
think
as
it's,
well.
that, you know, technically, it's a project, it's in the MTP, and this is more of a different issue that I think
This is
we
more
should-
policy than it is
Yeah.
technical.
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
And so my recommendation is to move this forward to the the policy committee
Okay.
for their consideration.
We're the
With all
egghead
the
committee, and that's,
Sophisticated.
right.
Carolyn Harry.
We're, yeah, we've.
Yeah, I just figured I would ask a question or make a statement.
Is it short?
Very short.
Okay.
That we could get behind a TDM, but if you put it in there with the project, you're gonna have a fight on your hands, and I can guarantee that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a conversation for the policy committee.
Yep, just know it going in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, well, I don't need to speak on behalf of the entire committee, but I think I mean, everybody who's been involved in this, we're aware. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm gonna speak on behalf of Aaron now, because if we have this whole project in here, once again, design, right of way, everything, and we decide not to move forward, there runs the risk that if we did not move the project forward, that we would have to pay back all of the money that had been invested to get the project to that point. So that is also a consideration for the policy committee when deciding whether or not to move this project forward, because there runs a risk that if you cannot complete this project, then we would be on the hook and we pay everything back. So that's another thing to keep in mind, so. Yes.
Madam Chair, I don't know if this is the right time, but could you please clarify, is the intent for modeling or for a travel demand management study and plan to reduce congestion for alternative means to?
That's what I was talking about.
Right. I think they're two different
Yeah.
things.
We're talking two different CDMs, transportation demand management and modeling.
I'm gonna let the, I probably shouldn't answer for
No,
one
I'd like to
minute.
know what your intent was. Was it
Well, no,
my?
the comment came from, and that's a clarification, I guess, because the term TDM was actually used in your
Yes.
comment. And what did you mean by TDM?
I am referring to the TDM that is specified in the UMed district plan that says that it should be done before anything else is done or this road is put into place. So if you read the UMed district plan, it says a TDM needs to be done, which will design all, or study. Evaluate, thank you, all modes and methods of transportation within the UMed district, from foot to Segway to bicycle to car to truck, all of it.
Then, excuse me, through the chair, then I take it that that's not the modeling.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
the
travel demand, it's not TDM modeling, it's the,
Alternatives.
thank you.
Right, transportation
Thank you,
demand,
Becker.
it's transportation demand management, yes.
Yes.
And there's lots of different alternatives. Yeah,
And that is in the UPWP for sure.
got it. But that also could be involved, I mean, in looking at TDM methods and evaluations could also be part of a design study and evaluating that. Yeah. I think it's not a standard as far as traffic analysis goes. It's really not. I think it's going to become more common though, and it is something that I think could be incorporated and asked for as part of that. I mean, part of that evaluation would be whether or not UAA should change the times of their classes, you know, so that they have different peaking factors. It's the shifting of work schedules for Providence and for the Alaska Native Medical Campus and how APU and all those different, I mean, it is really looking at peaking factors and trying to evaluate of how, whether or not a parking ride should be evaluated, whether or not, I mean, there's so many transportation demand management principles and things that can be evaluated that there could be a specialized project, so. Okay. So, do we have, I guess we've had the discussion, do we have a motion?
What portion?
The whole thing?
You meant, any comments?
So we
I
can.
guess-
I guess the recommendation, I guess what I know is, I mean, we have a recommendation of what they think of the UNET and whether or not we could.
I would like to see it move forward with the addition of, I don't know the right acronym, but
Transportation demand management study.
a transportation demand management study. I feel that even though I recognize that there's been comment that there will be some fight behind that and it goes through with the whole entire thing, the point of doing that study is to determine if the road is necessary and what elements need to go into that. So if it, to me, that's the point of doing it, and if you get behind that, then how the dice fall for that study should be how this project move forward. So that's my recommendation, to move forward with the addition of that.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
But does that change, my question for you guys, does that change anything as far as what's in here as proposed of having money in here showing design, right of way, and then utility?
I don't think the money will show.
Okay.
Just leave it in.
Leave as is.
And that would have to be the first, I guess, just for my own edification, that would have to be the first step done anyway, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so what you would do then is based upon the result of that study, then move the money around once you actually have the answer.
Might, yeah.
Okay.
You might.
What was that?
What would happen, the issue is the out years, 2021, 2022, 2023, there's still money in there based upon what's been done today. And and the question is, if we move forward with the TDM study, how can we necessarily have certainty over what that is? And so I think to keep things simple, they're gonna leave it with the understanding that once we get the result of the TDM study, we may have to reallocate and change that amount. Buy more, buy less at that time.
It could actually also result, I mean, something to consider, this is Northern Access to UMed District. The TDM study and what its recommendations are could result in a recommendation of not constructing a road that goes along the current proposed line that has been before, but investing the money in other intersection improvements, a park and ride facility, increased transit. It could actually result in, I guess, in other recommendations and projects, so it's probably wise to leave that money in there because it doesn't mean that it's gonna immediately require construction of the road. So, just something.
Your title says, or the description says build a 4-lane road, so.
The description of the project does. I don't deny that, and that's a question of whether or not that should be modified. But I guess the title of the project is North Access to UMed District does leave it open for interpretation. Yes.
You wouldn't actually be able to combine it, you'd have to do the TDM as a separate study.
Yeah.
Because you would be looking at the entire university medical district, not just this particular thing here. So my recommendation to you is if you want to keep a TDM thing in there, you're going to need to look at the whole area, and it really should be its own standalone study, not part of this project.
I guess this project, when it was doing the studies, was looking at the area.
Yeah, but it sounds like, based on their comments, they want more than just this area. They want the whole university district to have a TDM done, looking at all modes.
Can we all pause for a moment? We have 4 minutes technically till the end of this meeting, so do we have a motion to extend at least a little bit?
I moved it until 4:45.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Are there any opposed to
I guess the question I have, Aaron, this is probably for you, but anybody, if we just say, north access to the University Medical District, and then strike everything after the comma, does that get us out of scope jail, or whatever you want to call it?
I mean, you need to have the scope, so when you submit something to the feds for funding, they can know what you're doing.
Well,
You could add in language that says. do
it just
TDM.
says TDM.
For this location, you'd have to make it very specific as to what you're talking about, because you'd start getting into scope creep issues if you encompass the entire University Medical District area. So that's all I was trying. If you want to focus to this one, you can easily adjust the scope and say do a TDM for this location, something like that. I don't really know what gets you.
I think it is. I mean, I don't think,
Yeah.
personally, I don't think you need it
Element of
because
design.
And if that's
it's an northern access to the University Medical District, which is the entire thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's already included in there.
So if we just
Implied
strike,
within the.
so if we just strike everything after that
No,
column,
it-
that is relatively specific, or precludes an answer, or whatever you want to say.
I mean, you're fine with the current description right now. You wouldn't get it.
I think we're fine.
Well,
Unless you start making it a 6-lane facility.
well, and that's my concern, is I don't want to effectively color the result of the TDM by putting an actual specific answer in the name of it. And that's why if you just leave it, northern access to the university, whether that's bus, car, drone, spaceship, whatever it winds up being, I think that is a little bit,
It'd probably be okay. So just get rid of that portion that says a 0.5 mile 4-lane facility with non-motorized facilities. Fine.
Make it as generic as you can.
I would almost, I'd say construct improved access to the University Medical District from North Anchorage. Because that's really the intent, it's just the limited access from that northeast side.
So construct improved access to the University Medical District from North Anchorage.
Yes.
Okay. I wouldn't even see North Anchorage.
Northern side of.
Just
I guess
construct
like-
north
I guess
access to the
north
University
access.
Medical District, period. Just take out the
Construct
last.
access to the
Already
university.
said north, so.
I guess it does already say before, yeah, it says construct. I
Just
guess
take
it
out
should say
everything.
improve north access to UMed District.
Could we take the word construct out and just say improve access? Is that what you were going to say?
I said the word. The problem is that if you don't have the word construct or define that you're gonna move this forward as a project, then we would have to create a study, because the study would say that we're not actually doing that. So it comes down to whether or not, are you recommending to pull this out and put in a study, or are you recommending to keep this in place and move it forward? Because if nothing gets constructed, what it comes down to is that we will have to pay the feds back for the money that we do.
But if we do the TDM and it demonstrates that the road is not laid or there's different improvements, then and we construct those, and say they're pedestrian improvements, then we do not have to pay the fence back.
It says access, it doesn't say road, it says access.
Just so it could be, okay.
It says access.
Just take out, after medical district, take out that 0.54 lane.
Okay.
Just put it medical district, period.
Sounds good.
That leaves it very generic. And it could be anything.
like
Transit. Port.
That,
So, yes.
Could I clarify, the payback is money to the feds?
Yes.
only? And do you know how much that money is?
Whatever you spend.
Whatever you spend, whatever we would invest in that study
Nothing
getting
spent,
to that
so
point.
nothing spent to date,
Yes,
for which whatever you spend going forward. right?
yes. Starting in 2019, if it was associated with this project, any monies that we spent, if it didn't result in moving forward some sort of project, that money would end up having to be given back.
That's not entirely correct.
Not entirely true. It's,
Not-
but,
Mostly, but if there is, they have forgiven for certain things, cost, controversy, variety of other reasons.
yes.
So we
they're
have not
really-
had to pay any back.
They've actually done away with cost and controversy as a reason to.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, the feds are starting to require anything now if you don't. move forward.
Okay, all right.
They want you to be more focused
correct.
in your intent.
So,
What do you want? Motion to,
yes, we need a motion. We have more of the agenda to complete.
I make a motion to forward this to the policy committee as we have amended it.
I second that.
Okay, so Mr. Hanson forwarded, Ms. McNulty seconded. Or just to make sure, since we kind of discussed each item individually, you just to make a motion that describes how we amended, or. Okay. Are you clear on what our recommendations were on those? What? Okay.
Chris?
Okay. Well, I can just be just to reiterate, Mr. Hanson's recommendation for Academy Vanguard was to remove it from the table. Recommendation for Mr. Lindemood was to leave the, that's, which one is that? Ocean Dock, to leave the Ocean Dock project in, and to add this Port of Alaska name to be determined longer than, yes, $250,000 in FY19. And then to leave 92nd Avenue, but to change it to a reconnaissance study and modify that to $250,000 one. And then I guess accept all other staff recommendations as far as the modifications to respond to comments, and then to keep at this time the northern access in the table, changing the description a bit, and really leaving, I guess, kind of the controversy on whether or not to completely remove it to the policy. Great. We have a first and a second. Are there any opposed to that motion? Okay, we are so moved. That completes item 5A. So we now have 11 minutes left to the meeting. Do we want to try to at least finalize the freight advisory appointment to our other business item? Mr. Lindermood has left us, but item 5B is the freight advisory committee appointment.
All I can say is that there is a representative of the Railroad Freight Advisory Committee. It's challenging to get a quorum on that committee. And Mr. Lindemood suggested that he would show up. He'd be happy to show up. He's obviously very well versed in AMATS. So there's no prohibition in our bylaws that talks about being able to serve on two committees. So works for me.
That was my question. Didn't mean he left, went to that one.
Okay. And you said that they're usually on the freight advisory committee, there is typically a representative from the Alaska Railroad.
There is one specific railroad seat.
Okay, so it doesn't, I mean, as long as they're
It's
represented.
not filled right now.
It is not filled. Well, there is a thing, but he hasn't been used in a while. So, John Garner. Yeah, if you could smack him in the head or something.
No, I think Brian should.
Okay, so
Brian,
there's a specific railroad seat.
I'll make a recommendation to forward his name, even though it's left, and we can say all the bad things. What about him? Make a
You can't
recommendation.
make a motion yet, you do have to open it up.
I'm sorry.
Not yet. Are there any, I guess, questions from anybody else? That was like, my only question was whether or not you would serve on both, whether, so there's no conflict with that. Are there any questions or comments on this from the public? Yes.
Madam Chair, I just have a question about process. If after you do all the moving around of dollar amounts, is there any left over that could be used for another project that was?
We're not on that. We're not on that.
Not on that.
I'm
What-
sorry.
We're-
I'm
yeah.
sorry, my brain is still back on that. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. We're on to the next.
Excuse me.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Now you
What-
can make your motion.
What I made, the motion I made, in favor of Mr. Lindemuth being forward to the policy committee.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Hanson, seconded by Ms. Walsh. Are there any opposed to that motion? All right.
We can step down the room, but we still have enough, right? I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes.
Yeah, but we'll
Yes.
pass the business.
Yeah, now we're,
So
all right.
we nominate him for something.
Yeah, I know, we can. Yeah, darn. We were gonna nominate you, Alina, to be a part of it. You stepped out. I know, exactly. All right. So we have 9 minutes left. Do we want to try to go through any of the other updates? I know that Ms. Dooley has been here the whole time. I know we have a couple different things that we did not get to. But we now have 8 minutes left.
So is there some, is she here to speak to something? Can we do anything on
There's two consultants here. So either the question is, do we want a motion to extend a little bit further? We have completed our business items, so we technically do not need to have quorum to continue to listen to the informational items and the plan updates. So
I'll move to extend 5 p.m.
I second.
all right, are there any, what was that?
Can't see too much longer of a season.
Okay, all right. Are you okay to stay till 5? Okay. Are there any opposed to extending till 5? If we have to leave, we understand, and we have completed business items. All right, hearing none, we will, I guess we will move forward. And the question is, I know this is a change of the agenda, but Vivian, are you okay if we let the consultants go first?
Absolutely.
All right. I know I'm not supposed to make a motion, but I'm making the executive decision. We're having those go first. So, Jeannie, you're here for the C Street Ocean Dock Road City updates. You have a...
I have a PowerPoint.
Okay.
So I don't see it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay. I feel like you've already talked about this project already, so and there's not a lot of time, so I'll try and go quick. Like kind of was discussed, this was a reconnaissance study of a limited area. So the idea was what problems need to be solved here, what possible solutions are they, and then compare those solutions with each other. So the project was brought forward by the Freight Committee, who was really worried about the drainage at the intersection. And just to be, I guess, this is the intersection coming down from the C Street ramps that goes into the port. And so the Freight Committee was very worried about pavement damage that occurs regularly every year. And they asked that a study be done. And then if we're doing a study, we're going to find out all of the problems that we can find and how we would address them. So additional problems that we identified was sight distance as you go around the curve. That's Government Hill to the north. And so the curve is going around a hill, and there's some sight distance problems there, especially trucks seeing the trains on the road. And then also you can see on the top of the diagram, there's a left turn there. So when a truck stops to turn left, then trucks maybe back up behind that truck, and that causes a queue that may surprise a truck as he's coming down from C Street. Then there were some pedestrian issues. People who live in Government Hill or work in Government Hill wanting to walk and bicycle back and forth, both to downtown, which the current path for that is there's a sidewalk that goes across the ramps and then onto the bridge. And then also people wanting to get down to Ship Creek Trail and the fishing and Sharon just talked about a new campground and that kind of thing. And currently pedestrians are not allowed from the pedestrian crossing on the ramps down to the Ocean Dock Road intersection.
Correction. There's nothing that legally prohibits them from being there. There just are, there's nothing.
I think there's signs.
Are there signs that
There's
actually prohibit? Okay, then this is a location where they are prohibited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's sort of, there's signs that say watch for pedestrians and there's signs that say don't walk here. So it's kind of a sign.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess usually we will prohibit ped crossings if they're prohibited from being there. If it's controlled, we have the highway that, no pedestrian and bicycle, like what they have on the ramps is the entry to the Seward Highway. To me, that would be a sign prohibition.
That's a similar
sign?
It's signed similarly to that.
Okay. Okay, so they go there anyway.
Right, well,
Yeah.
there's good reasons for, the path on the bridge is very narrow, so some people are nervous about that, especially on their bike in the winter when their bikes get higher and higher off the ground on the bridge, and then downtown is not where everybody's trying to go. So that's pedestrians, and then, and then there's the railroad crossings. So, but Brian mentioned the congestion, which our report didn't really get into the congestion caused by the train. It did mention that cars get delayed by the train, and then the train will try and pull off and let cars get by, so the trains are being delayed by this. She says they don't, but they did.
Not on purpose, they're on their schedule.
So there's delay either way. And then just that it's skewed, that means when a truck is trying to stop and look for if a train is coming, it's kind of hard to see. And also bicycles crossing the skewed crossing can get their tires caught.
So while you have that slide up, can I very quickly show you what Brian was talking about?
Very
Real quick.
quickly.
This is excellent. So what Brian was saying is here, this particular track is moving the road where the track is and bring that track over here outboard. So take that space, move the road over, put that track outboard. You eliminate this crossing, this congestion. You still have this, but you eliminate this, so traffic inbound and outbound is not held up by this crossing.
Does it cross again too? Doesn't it cross the road again too once you get onto the track?
The track, once you're on port, yeah, there's another one. What happens here is it goes into the fuel area. There's a track rack for that. Then there's the cement boats, and then there's the cement
crossing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So one of the complicated parts is all of the different people using the intersection, which we kind of dealt with already. And our study, we had an online survey that was completed, and it tended to, respondents tended to be passenger vehicles and bicyclists. So not necessarily representative of the truckers in the online survey. Then we also did an agency field visit and an advisory council meeting that included all of that whole big group of people. So we got good comments, I think, and a general pretty good idea of everybody's concerns with the intersection. And then an open house in last November that did our recommendations. We talked about that. So we came up with 4 alternatives. No build was the first one, so do nothing. The second one, this really is focused on the drainage problem and so the pavement condition deteriorates every year because of poor drainage in the area, especially in the spring. So basically, alternative 2 would improve that drainage, put in a fin drain to catch a lot of the water coming off the hill, and then a railroad warning flasher so the trucks have a better idea of when there's a train on the crossing. And alternative 3 is, I think, what's proposed in the tip. It widens the roadway to the north and pushes the retaining wall back, and that gives room for a few different things. A left turn lane at that side road so that trucks turning left up on that, at the top of the graph there, are out of the way and everybody else can go past. When we showed that to Brian, he was concerned that lengthens the length of the track on the road, and also as a train came, it could get a truck stuck there. So we put in more control so that trucks don't get stuck in that left turn lane. And then the other thing it does is it allows us to widen the median between the ramps, which could allow us to bring a sidewalk down along the north side of the ramp and then a pedestrian crossing to Ocean Dock. Ocean Dock Road has shoulders for pedestrians. So it kind of it gives us a place where we expect pedestrians and bikes to be, compared to right now, which is they're just all over the ramps. I think that's basically that one. And then alternative 4 is kind of Brian's and Sharon's idea. It doesn't specifically talk about swapping the tracks, but just completely change everything. It's kind of the idea
But it was only really looking at this intersection, it didn't look at the whole port.
Right,
Yeah.
and kind of completely out of the scope where do the railroad tracks want to be, but you would need to look at that to do this. Comparing them, so the drainage is addressed by all three build alternatives. The site distance is addressed to a certain extent by all three. The horizontal, I didn't talk about this. Trucks complain as they leave the port and go up to the C Street, up the C Street ramps to C Street. Sometimes they have a hard time getting up speed to then merge with the traffic on the C Street bridge. And so only that third alternative that kind of widens that curve would give them a little more up the hill. This fourth one basically stops them at the bottom of the hill, so it's kind of worse. And really for them, this kind of configuration only works out if you improve your access, like through Whitney Road. If that eventually was improved and trucks used that more, this would make a lot of sense. That one, pedestrian and bicycles could be addressed by all three build ones, but is best with 3 and 4. And the skewed railroad is really only addressed by completely revamping that intersection. And so this is a little bit off. The next step is alternative 3 is Impotent. That's
Any questions for Jeannie?
One question on the pedestrian crossing at the base of the ramps. Would that be like a, not signalized, that's just a signed crossing, is that right?
right.
Signed and marked.
Maybe flashers?
No,
No flashers?
No.
Signed and marked, okay.
not unless there's more than 20 pedestrian. I mean, it could be upgraded at some point if it becomes necessary. Okay. Thank you, Jeannie. All right. So we have our, no, exactly. Do you have a,
I do.
PowerPoint? Okay. Next item is the Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan update. Thank you for sticking with us. Yeah.
Pleasure. It's good.
Thank you.
All good
Rockstar
input.
Anchorage is better for us. All your good input.
I'll be fast. Well, you have 11 minutes. Actually, yeah, you have less than that, hopefully, because we've got a couple. Like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Very thanks. I have it.
New ones in your emails.
Right, sorry.
You still take care of them.
I do. I just stopped drinking coffee today, and that was a really bad decision.
Probably should be on that.
Yeah, I really think I'm gonna start with it right now. No, I'm always like, then you're having a headache, I'm like, really, I don't think yeah, I should feed the beast. Oh, good. Hey, hey, that looks snazzy. All right, let's do it. Okay. So this is a PDF, so it's good. It's a little funky. That's okay. So my name's Tanya Iden, and I work for Agbebep Consulting, and we are sub-consultants to GridWorks, which is a Portland, Oregon-based firm, and they specialize in doing human services coordinated transportation plans. And this is an AMATS secondary plan, and kind of my intent of being here today is just to be like, hey, this is one of your plans, it's super awesome, and hopefully you'll approve it maybe later in November. So, so that's the intent. It's just so when I show up in November with a more detailed plan, you're not like, what is this? What? So that's kind of why I'm here today. So essentially, I'll just tell you a little bit about where we're at and what's coming up next. And I will scroll through this to do it. Okay, this is my next slide. Oh yeah, these are the 4 things I'm going to talk about. A little background on the project, what we've done for outreach, and give you kind of a prelude of the plan goals, but they're still real high level, and then just let you know the next steps. So human services, coordinated transportation plans.
really focus on kind of the most vulnerable in our community. They're really looking at how we help people who don't have a lot of transportation choices, or their choices are just the ones that we provide as a community. So the bus or anchor rides or walking on our streets, or rolling on our streets. So essentially people who maybe don't drive as their primary source of getting around. People with disabilities, seniors, low-income individuals who maybe can't afford a car. And we think about strategies for how we can better serve those people with our transportation network. And then we kind of prioritize them for funding. And this is a required plan of the federal government if we want to get a certain pot of money to help support these services. 5310 is the number. Anyways, enhanced mobility, disability, transportation services. Okay, Janie can tell me what the actual pot of money is. And these are the things that are required by the federal government that are part of the plan. And that little image right there is the last plan that we did, which was in 2009. So this plan's really due for an update. This is 2018. It requires, of course, engaging with the public, kind of community background, inventory of resources, needs assessment, kind of by defining what the gaps in services are, and then thinking about strategies. So I'm mostly going to talk to you about kind of our outreach that we've done. We initiated the planning process in March, so it's been a while. And we had a bunch of big events at that point. We had kind of a series of open houses. We met with city leadership. Some of you were at that meeting. We had a transportation provider meeting, so we met with folks too that maybe provide kind of Medicaid billable transportation services, all those different kind of smaller buses and different transportation providers around town. We had 2 open houses that were lightly attended, and we did it 2 different times of day. We did them in communities where people might not readily, or might use the bus more. So, but open houses I think are tough. And then we did have a big meeting with community organizations that serve the people that would be using our transportation system. So, people like the Alaska Mental Health Trust were there, the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education, Access Alaska, kind of all of the big players who really care about this for the people that they serve. And then we've also done a survey of transportation providers. And then we just did, so awesome, English language learners focus group at the Alaska Literacy Project. And so we had, there's some more slides on that. And then just this morning, actually, I was at the Midtown Job Center talking to job seekers, kind of trying to tease out how transportation affects their ability to look for work. So those were some of our outreach activities. And then kind of 4 big themes have come out of that outreach, and that's what this plan will hope to address. And that's, there was a big shift in our transportation or people mover system. And I think, it's good, and it was good that we looked at it, but it has kind of affected some people, just their daily life. Because we did focus more on frequency versus breadth of our system. And we did hear quite a lot from people in the disability community and people who really rely on the bus that they're having to go further to get to the bus, which works for some people, but if you're rolling on our city streets that are unplowed with snow or don't even have very good ADA access, it's really can be a challenge. So those are kind of 2 of the big themes that we heard. And then also some positive theme is that there's a lot of excitement and energy amongst all these organizations that serve people who need to use our public transit system to kind of help collaborate and think about creative funding strategies. And then I don't know if it's because it was in March when we had these meetings, and remember we got that late burst of snow like at the end of last year. The snow thing was just like a real big focus, a lot. So just thinking about how everybody needs to be able to get around our town when it's snowing, not just people who are driving in cars. And then just to highlight the focus group that we had with English language learners, it was just such a cool focus group because we had 3 interpreters that were simultaneously interpreting in 3 different languages. So we had 4 Spanish speakers and they had an interpreter. We had 3 Arabic speakers and 1 Korean speaker. And this was all done at the Anchorage Literacy Project or Alaska Literacy Program. So they helped facilitate this. But I guess one of the biggest takeaways for me was that this whole group of people, and it was 8 people, so it's just a little small
insight into, new arrivals to Alaska and immigrant community, but all of them essentially said that they want to ride the bus. Like, that's how they want to get around. They come from places where, like, they're used to having a functioning bus system. So I just think if we think of the bus as just such an essential part of our economic framework in our city, I think sometimes we tend to look at it as a social safety net, but it's not. It's actually how people get to work. It's how people get around. And so, anyways, it was really great to hear that from this group of folks.
All right, Tanya, I'm giving you a 1-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Anyways, these were the focus group results, just asking them how they arrived at the meeting, and most of them said they were dropped off, but then we asked them how they would prefer to travel, and they said they would prefer to travel by bus. And then, okay, I won't really go through the survey, but it kind of, shares a lot of the same information that we heard. And then I guess, just to get to this piece, this is the direction, the big broad goals that the plan is heading, and it really is trying to be focused, because the previous plan, I think, had 7 big goals and like 47 strategies, and that was really hard to implement, and maybe not a lot of it happened. So we're really focusing on improving mobility options, optimizing funding, and improving collaboration. And we'll get more into the detailed strategies in the next kind of couple, month, and then we'll be in front of you talking about those and hoping for your approval of the plan. Do I have another slide? Oh, yes. Oh, you're fast. I know. Next steps are, so actually on Monday, we're meeting again with that working group of all the different service providers. And then we're meant to also brief the PAC, Policy Committee, on the 27th. And then hopefully in October, we have a plan on the streets. And then in November, we'll probably be back in front of you in December, actually. So, sorry.
So just to give you an update, it's just the policy committee, it's the PC, and it actually is meeting on the 20th, and that's 27th now.
Oh, perfect.
So
Okay.
I'm just giving you a heads up, that way you know, yeah, it's next week
Thanks.
instead. So
Does anyone have questions? I know it's right at 5 o'clock, so.
it's right before.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay.
And I mean, I really hate to do injustice. I'm sorry, Vivian, that you didn't
No,
get
that's
the
okay.
update. And there's not a final opportunity for public comment. I apologize, but we are at 5 o'clock, so we do have to end the meeting. Thank you very much for staying with us, folks.
Good.